I was just standing there, holding my plate, when my mom looked straight at me across the table and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're the reason this family struggles. You'll never be a success." I didn't even flinch. I'd heard worse before. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. My younger brother stood up, quiet, shaking, and said, "Actually, I owe her everything." The entire room froze. What he said after that, it changed the way they looked at me forever. But before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching this from? I always check, and I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. The smell of rosemary roast and fresh rolls did nothing to soften the knife-like tension in the room. Everyone had gathered for Sunday dinner, the big dinner. My mother insisted on it. She said it was tradition, even though it always felt like an audition for approval. I sat quietly at the corner of the table, my hands folded in my lap, pretending not to notice the looks. Mom was wearing her favorite pearl necklace, her lips painted in that same sharp red that always reminded me of warnings. My stepdad scrolled, his phone under the table. My cousins whispered and giggled, and across from me sat my younger brother, Daniel, the only person who didn't treat me like I didn't exist. But tonight was different. I could feel it. My chair felt colder than usual. "So," Mom said, placing her wine glass down with a deliberate clink. "Does anyone know what our dear Madeline's doing with her life these days?" I looked up. "She's still working at that, what do you call it?" Aunt Marie offered with a smug smile. "That bookstore cafe?" There it was. The trigger. Mom turned to me with narrowed eyes. "That's right, wasting away in some dusty little hole as usual." I opened my mouth, but she raised her hand. No, don't bother explaining. You've been a burden on this family since the day you dropped out of college. And let's not forget who paid for that first year. Her voice grew louder. "We struggle because of you. You suck the air out of this house." I froze. My heartbeat thumped in my ears. Everyone was watching now. Some nodding, others pretending not to care. I could feel the tears pushing, burning. "But you never said that to Daniel," I said softly. "Even when— Don't you dare bring your brother into this," she snapped. "He's doing something with his life. You're just floating." Actually, Daniel's voice cut through the room like lightning. He stood up. Everyone turned. No one expected it, especially not Mom. "She's the reason I'm alive." Silence. "She gave up college to stay home with me when I tried to take my own life in high school. You remember that, don't you, Mom? Or were you too busy hosting brunch?" My mother's face turned pale. Daniel's voice shook, but held. "You were out golfing the day I overdosed. Madeline found me. She called the ambulance. She rode with me. She held my hand the whole way. And when I woke up, she was the only one there." I stared at him, stunned. I hadn't expected this. I'd buried that memory so deep I forgot it still lived in him. "She gave up everything for me," he said, eyes locked on Mom. "And you've been punishing her for it ever since. You call that a burden?" Mom's mouth opened, but no words came out. The room stayed silent, for once, completely silent, and in that quiet, something shifted, something big. Nobody moved. The sound of a spoon dropping onto a porcelain plate was the only thing that broke the silence after Daniel's words echoed across the long dining table. You could hear the soft hum of the AC now. My uncle cleared his throat, but even he didn't dare speak. My mother stared at Daniel as if she were looking at someone she'd never really seen before. What are you talking about?" she said, her voice suddenly hollow. "That was years ago. We all helped you." Daniel shook his head slowly, bitter amusement in his eyes. "No. You gave interviews and sympathy to your friends. You cried in the garden for show. But Madeline, she stayed with me, She watched me, slept in a chair by my bed every night for 2 months. I could barely breathe. Do you remember what you told her when she said she wanted to stay home and make sure I didn't hurt myself again? Daniel asked, voice hardening. You said, fine, waste your life if you want to. Just don't expect us to pick you back up when you're broke. And then you told people I was cured. You said I was strong now, that everything was fine, and you used her sacrifice like it was yours. Mom turned to me slowly, her hands trembling. You never told me it was that serious. I finally spoke. Would you have listened if I did? She didn't answer. Daniel kept going. You told me I had to keep up appearances. You threatened to pull me out of school if I didn't. Fix my face. And she's the one who stayed home every single day and helped me rebuild. She gave up her scholarships, her dream school, her friends, everything. I stared at my brother. The ache in my chest threatened to shatter me. I remembered all of it, but hearing him say it aloud, in front of everyone who had always treated me like the family stain, it brought a heat to my throat I couldn't fight back. She used to bring me hot tea at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep, he said. She used to sit in the hallway outside my room because I was afraid of being alone. She used to skip meals just to make sure I ate. Mom wiped under her eyes quickly, trying to hide it. Daniel, that was a very difficult time, for all of us. No, Mom, he said. It was difficult for her. You just ignored it. I wanted to disappear. Aunt Marie whispered to her husband, clearly uncomfortable now. One of the cousins had started quietly filming, but Daniel didn't care. He looked around the table with a clarity that silenced everyone again. I don't care how long it's been, he said, looking at each person. You all let her carry everything, and now you act like she never mattered. And you, he turned to Mom. You called her a burden, today, in front of all of them, again, after everything. Daniel, stop, she whispered, her voice cracking. But he didn't. He looked straight at me. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. That was when I cried. Not in the weak way they expected from me. It wasn't broken or bitter. It was the quiet, overwhelmed cry of someone whose truth had been hidden for so long. It started to feel like a lie. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater. I didn't want anyone to know, I said softly. You asked me not to tell. I know, he replied. But I'm done letting you carry the weight alone. For once I wasn't invisible. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. After that dinner, everything changed. Not on the surface at first. The table was cleared, the leftovers packed, the dessert untouched. No one dared look at me. They whispered behind folded napkins and tightened jaws, pretending Daniel's words hadn't shaken the very bones of the family, but they had. Oh, they had. That night, I sat in my room, the same one I'd grown up in. Still had the faint outline of my childhood glow in the dark stars on the ceiling, and for the first time in years, I let myself exhale. Daniel knocked, once before walking in. He carried a mug of hot chocolate, the way I used to do for him. He set it on my nightstand. Thought you could use it. I nodded. Thanks. He sat on the edge of my bed, sighing. I've wanted to say it for years, but every time I opened my mouth, I'd see Mom's face, or Dad's silence, and I'd just fold. I know, I whispered. I got used to folding too. He looked at me then, really looked at me. You were the glue, and I let them treat you like the crack. That sentence, so simple, ripped through me. The next morning, everything felt tight, like the house itself was waiting to explode. Mom avoided me. She poured coffee like nothing had happened. She talked about grocery coupons. She asked Dad if he needed the car. But Dad's silence wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't calm indifference. It was shaken quiet. A man who had heard a truth, but didn't know what to do with it. By mid-afternoon, I went out for a walk, needing space. The old bookstore cafe where I worked was only 4 blocks away. It smelled like ink and cinnamon, and it was the only place that ever felt like mine. Ms. Carla, the owner, waved as I came in. "Your brother dropped this off earlier, told me to give it to you." It was an envelope. Inside, a folded printout, an email. I read the first line, went and sat down, knees weak. "To whom it may concern, I'm writing this as a personal testimony about my sister, Madeline Avery." Daniel had written it. In the email, he told a university about how I had saved his life, how I had sacrificed my future for his. He wrote about the pain, the nights, the fear, the loyalty. He wrote about how I was the reason he made it to where he was. He ended with a request. "I hope you'll consider reinstating her full scholarship. She more than earned it, not through grades, but through the kind of selflessness this world rarely sees." There was a signature at the bottom, from Daniel. But what shook me more was the second note attached from the dean himself. This letter moved us deeply. We would be honored to invite Madeline back into the program, with full academic reinstatement and housing support. I blinked through the tears. Daniel hadn't just defended me. He'd fought for my future behind the scenes. But that wasn't all. When I returned home, my uncle's truck was parked in the driveway. Uncle Louis, the quiet one, the one no one ever listened to. He was sitting in the living room with a man in a gray suit and briefcase. Mom was pacing. "What is this?" I asked softly. Louis turned to me. "Sit down, sweetheart." The man in the suit stood up. "I'm Mr. Granger. I'm your grandfather's estate attorney. He passed 3 months ago. I'm here to finalize an addendum he requested be read only once all family members were present." My stomach dropped. "He left me nothing," Mom said sharply. "He made that clear years ago." The attorney cleared his throat. "Actually, that's not entirely accurate." He pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in trembling cursive and said, "Your grandfather left something very important, but only for Madeline." The envelope felt heavier than it should have. My name, Madeline, written in soft, fading cursive ink. The kind only people from another generation use, like something sacred, like every letter mattered. My fingers shook as I opened it. Everyone was watching now. Dad had appeared behind the hallway arch, arms crossed tightly. Mom was frozen, mouth pinched, mascara smudged at the corners like she'd been crying in secret. Daniel sat beside me. He didn't say a word, but I could feel the quiet armor of his presence. I unfolded the letter. It started simply. "My sweet girl, if you're reading this, then my time has passed. But my pride in you has not. It never will." My throat tightened. I saw how they treated you. I saw the way they dismissed your kindness as weakness. The way they glorified Daniel's survival, but ignored your sacrifice. I wanted to step in 1,000 times, but you always said, "Let it go, Grandpa. They're family." My eyes burned. I remembered saying that, over and over, after every slight, after every whisper. You are not a burden. You are the backbone. And it's time they finally see it. I looked up. No one dared move. Mom was pale. Aunt Marie looked away. I built this family's name from the dust of a steel mill floor. I know what real strength looks like. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. To be seen. It holds the door open and takes the blame in silence. And you, Madeline, have always been the strongest of us all. That's why I left it to you, all of it. The house, the land, the shares in the family trust. Because if anyone deserves to decide the future of this family, It's the one who kept it from falling apart. The letter fell from my fingers before I even realized my hand had let go. Mom gasped audibly. No, that can't be true. The attorney nodded solemnly. It's been verified, witnessed, and updated. 3 months before Mr. Avery passed, he changed the beneficiary. Everything now belongs to Madeline. Dad looked stunned. Uncle Louis cleared his throat. I was the witness. I was there. He told me the same thing that night. They'll never see her value until I make them see it. Mom stumbled back into the armchair. But the house, she whispered. He promised I could. The house is yours, legally, the attorney confirmed. But only if Madeline agrees. She has the power to sign over residency rights. The room exploded. Aunt Marie started mumbling about fairness. My cousin stormed out, whispering curses under her breath. Dad sat down, rubbing his face like he couldn't believe the world had just flipped upside down. And Mom? Mom just looked at me, like she was seeing me for the very first time. I stood slowly. I never wanted any of this, I said, voice clear. I just wanted to be treated like I mattered. Mom opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her lips trembled. I stepped toward her. You called me a burden, I said. You made me believe that loving too much, giving too much, made me weak. But now you're sitting in a house I own, holding back tears not because I failed, but because I didn't. She blinked, stunned. You said I'd never be a success, I whispered. But the truth is, I was your success story all along. You just didn't want to see it. I turned to leave. But before I stepped out, Daniel stood beside me. He placed his hand gently on my shoulder. You going to be okay? I nodded. And then I said, without looking back, starting tomorrow, I'm changing everything. The next morning didn't come with fireworks. It came with silence. No knocking on my door, no fake smiles in the kitchen, just the faint smell of burnt toast and guilt clinging to the air. I stepped out of my room slowly, feeling taller than I ever had in that house. For years, I had walked, on eggshells, tiptoed around feelings that weren't mine, drowned my voice to keep the peace in a war that was never fair. But today, I was done being quiet. I headed straight to the living room, where everyone had gathered again. The same people who had laughed when Mom called me a burden. The same ones who nodded when she said I'd never be a success. They were all there, silent, stiff, awkward, and I was ready. I cleared my throat. I've spoken with Mr. Granger, I began, voice firm. I've made my decision. Mom looked up quickly. Her mascara was clean today, but her eyes were red. Dad refused to meet my gaze. My aunt sat stiffly, arms folded like a child about to be scolded. I'm keeping the house, I said. There were murmurs, a few gasps. No surprise. But you can all stay, I added, letting the room hang in it. Under a few conditions. Mom blinked. What? First, I continued, I want a formal written apology from every person in this room who laughed, mocked, or humiliated me over the last 10 years. Signed. Sincere. No excuses. And I want it delivered today. Aunt Marie scoffed. That's ridiculous. You're free to leave if you don't like it, I said, turning to her coldly. But let's not forget whose name is on the deed. She looked away. Second, I continued, Daniel stays here, rent-free, for as long as he wants. He's the only reason I didn't completely fall apart in this house. Daniel looked stunned. Mads, I can't. You can, I said, and you will. Because if anyone deserves a place to heal, it's you. He nodded, tears brimming. Third, I turned to my parents. You don't get to control the narrative anymore, I've already reached out to Grandpa's foundation. We're opening a mental health support fund under Daniel's name and mine. You told people I was the reason this family struggled. Now I'm making sure no one else in this town has to." Mom stood up abruptly. "You're doing all this to hurt us?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm doing this to reclaim myself." Her voice cracked. "But I'm your mother." I looked at her, calm. "And I gave you 1,000 chances to act like it." She sank back into the chair. I turned to leave, but paused. "One more thing," I said, pulling a folded paper from my back pocket. "Here's the scholarship reinstatement letter from the university I gave up for this family. I start this fall." "You're going back," Dad whispered. I looked him in the eye. "No, I'm moving forward." Daniel walked me out. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. When we reached the porch, he stopped. "You know, you didn't have to let them stay," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but letting them see me rise in the very space they tried to bury me, that's the real victory." He smiled. "Proud of you, Mads." I took a deep breath. The air smelled different that morning. Lighter, stronger. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the family burden. I was the lesson.